And I was there the week before last, and I spoke to Republican members of the Congress who are fairly confident that they will get that package through in the early part of January.
How crucial a point do you think we have reached in the war in Ukraine?
We're at a very important point because President Putin is not really making very much progress in this war. The other day, he gave his New Year message and didn't mention Ukraine and the battle there as well. And he is not taking much territory inside Ukraine. So I think we can see what he's doing at the moment, which is using missile attacks on civilian targets to try and demoralize the people in Ukraine. But I think he'll be as unsuccessful with that as he has been up to date with the military campaign. But it is all the more important that the West stays united and that we give the Ukrainians the support and the help, both financial and military, that they desperately need at the present moment and that they really deserve to have.
And we've had indications just in the last few days that we can expect a further announcement of British military support. But the military equipment and missiles that the UK is providing is a tiny fraction, isn't it, compared to the extent of support coming from the United States. And as we were discussing earlier in the programme, we've got the next tranche of that funding still being blocked in the Senate. That is reaching a critical point, isn't it?
Well, let's look on the bright side for a moment. First of all, the British contribution has been substantial, and I give the government full credit for doing that, although I hope that they are going to very soon say what the 2024 vote for Ukraine is going to be. The autumn statement didn't include anything there as well. So let's hope that the rhetoric by Defence Secretary Shapps is followed by Treasury action in this area. But looking across the Atlantic, and I was there the week before last, and I spoke to Republican members of the Congress who are fairly confident that they will get that package through in the early part of January. And if that's the case, that'll make a big difference to the Ukrainians. And secondly, the European Union was blocked by the veto used by Prime Minister Orban of Hungary. But the European Union in the last few days has made it clear that they intend to get round that and that Ukraine will continue to get, by different means, the sort of help and support that it deserves and needs at the present moment.
But we keep hearing that the Republicans are on the verge of approving this next tranche of aid. And each time it comes to a crucial vote, that small group of Republicans continues to block it. And as we were hearing from Angela Stent a short time ago, there is perhaps only a few months to go before those air defences, which have been so crucial in protecting civilians in some of the major cities of Ukraine, literally start to run out of missiles.
Well, Angela Stent is a real, genuine expert who I very much admire. And she's right that the time is running out and we need to give the Ukrainians the weaponry they need at the time when it is going to be of maximum use. And I think that's the crucial area at the present moment. And the European Union has made a very clear decision that they are going to get help, military and civil help, to the Ukrainians, even in spite of the veto of individual countries inside the Union itself. So Europe is going to have to do much more and not constantly rely on the Americans, especially in an election year there, where politics have become so toxic. I still, however, retain some confidence that the Americans will eventually come to a compromise and will allow the assistance to Ukraine to get through.
But we have, in this presidential election, the very real prospect of Donald Trump returning to the White House. He said he's going to end the war in Ukraine on day one. It's not quite clear exactly what he has in mind. But the fear in Ukraine clearly is that the military aid which they've become dependent on from the United States could at that stage dry up.
Well, Donald Trump, even if he's elected, does not become president until January 2025. So that's quite a long way from just now, and a lot can happen in the meantime. And it's not, after all, guaranteed that he is going to win either the Republican nomination or indeed the general election in November of this year. But it is and remains a worry that Vladimir Putin seems to think that all he has to do is to hang on, despite making little or no progress on the battlefield, until President Trump comes into office and offers him a lifeline. Now, these are two major assumptions that he's making, and they underestimate the tenacity and the sustainability of the Ukrainians in this particular matter. And as long as we, the Europeans, give them the help and support that they require, I have no doubt that they are going to make substantial progress during 2024.
But we are hearing, not just in the United States, but some major European capitals as well, this sense that there was this huge expectation of Ukraine making significant gains in that offensive earlier in the year. That did not yield the significant change in the front line that some people had hoped for. And do you fear that there is a certain war weariness creeping in, and that those countries facing severe economic pressures may be increasingly reluctant to continue to provide Ukraine with the military equipment and the financial support that it needs?
Well, I worry personally that Ukraine is dropping down the headlines in the news, especially because of what is happening in Gaza today. Because Ukraine matters, so much to us and to the world and to democracy as a whole, and a weariness comes in at some point. But the very fact that you are giving such prominence to it on your programme today does indicate that we are keeping our attention focused on what's happening there, and you're absolutely right to do so. The stakes in Ukraine are huge for all of us. If Vladimir Putin succeeds in swallowing up a neighbouring country, then none of us are going to be safe. None of us will be able to sleep easily in our beds if this man has managed to extinguish the Ukrainian light that is burning so fiercely at the present moment. And the world will be a very, very uncomfortable place if it is seen that you can change borders by the use of force. And I hope that the rest of the world wakens up to precisely how big the stakes are involved in what is going on in the Donbass in Ukraine today.
Well, I do want to ask you about that other conflict because we have had indications from Israel that it has no intention of giving up on its military offensive in Gaza, despite growing concerns about the humanitarian situation there. And we have today the British Defence Secretary, Grant Shapps, saying that the UK is prepared to take military action against Houthi rebels unless they stop attacking shipping in the Red Sea. What do you make of that warning from Grant Shapps?
I think Defence Secretary Shapps is absolutely right to make it clear to these people that we're not going to have international waterways blocked by a handful of rebels who happen to be being armed by the Iranians at the present moment. And so far, of course, we haven't taken action against these people on the ground because we've been reluctant to expand the area of conflict in the area. But they have to recognise that they are now having an impact on global trade by what they're doing. And I think, not just the United Kingdom, but other countries as well will have to seek to take action if this is going to be stopped.
But what about the risk of Britain being drawn into some kind of direct confrontation with Iran, which of course backs those Houthi rebels?
Well, we're not going to be doing anything on our own. We don't have the capacity to do it, nor
But we are
would it
talking
be
about using
sensible.
British military planes or missiles to strike at Houthi targets.
Well, I don't know the mind of the Defence Secretary, but I know if I was in the Ministry of Defence today, I would be coordinating any action that was likely to take place with a lot of allies in the region. After all, if they are going to impact on international trade and international waterways, it's not simply a problem for the United Kingdom. So we have to do these things in concert with others, especially those who are equally concerned about the impact that it's having on trade.
Let me just ask you finally about the situation in Gaza. We have seen that the British government's position is that it has backed humanitarian pauses in the fighting, a brief cessation of firing in order to allow humanitarian supplies through. But it has stopped short of calling for a ceasefire, despite growing backing for such a move, given that you've got 21,000 people dead in Gaza and warnings of famine in Gaza because there are so many people that are literally desperate for the most basic supplies. Do you think that it is time for the British government to start to back those calls for a ceasefire so that civilians can have a chance of surviving?
Well, there is only a small difference between a humanitarian pause and a ceasefire, because a ceasefire would effectively mean a surrender to Hamas and the terrorism that they are inflicting on on Israel and indeed on their own people as well. But I think calling for a humanitarian pause, which I think is now becoming more universal, is absolutely imperative in the circumstances. But I would say to you again, we shouldn't always be pessimistic about these things. There are movements taking place in Qatar, in Egypt, and in the wider region there, of people who are genuinely concerned about this conflict and the way in which it's potentially going to spread to other parts of the Middle East. And therefore, the action that was taken in the United Nations over the UN Security Council resolution, gave a germ of an idea that there might well be an international initiative made in order to try and bring this conflict to a satisfactory conclusion.